Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Acosta, and on behalf of SACAC, I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to spend part of your Sunday with us. We know that you have other places where you can be, so we're grateful that you're willing to spend it with us. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Veena Rao, who will be our presenter today. And Veena, thank you so much for presenting today, and it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. As Juan said, welcome. It's a Sunday afternoon, and it's a beautiful day, at least here in Georgia. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm Veena Rao. I'm a independent counselor. I work with high school students, and I also work to help students through the college admissions process. And so today's presentation is basically how do you get ready for the college application cycle? If you are seniors, then obviously time is of the essence. I'm going to share some tips with you about how colleges evaluate students so that it also gives you then context to be able to understand how you prepare for the college admissions process. So today, as I said, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how colleges evaluate applications. We'll look at the Common App, which has over 1,000 colleges on it that accept your applications for admission. And we'll cover some essential portions of the Common App itself and give you some resources that you can use to be able to get started, or at least to clarify any questions that you may have as you go through the application process itself. So when colleges evaluate your application for admission, they're obviously looking at your academic achievement. To be able to understand how you're performing academically, they would have access to either courses and grades that you yourself have entered and or a transcript that the school has provided. So they're able to evaluate the courses that you've taken in the context of your high school. How do they understand the context of your high school? The high school counselor would be uploading a school report that allows them to understand, what the school offers, and then they're able to evaluate you in that context. They look at obviously the rigor of your curriculum. What does the school offer, and what have you taken advantage of during your time in high school? And there are places on the Common App, not just your transcript, where you will tell them what courses you are either currently taken or have taken. There are certain states where standardized testing is still required, and so students do submit their test scores for places that mandate those test scores be included, but there are a lot of schools that have also gone test optional. But the test scores are also another context that the universities look at when they evaluate your application for admission, a student's application for admission. In addition, they look at if the school requires students to submit teacher letters of recommendation, they are going to be looking at them. Your teachers play a role in allowing universities to understand who you are as a student, and what do you bring to that classroom environment. Your personal statement, which is your main essay for the Common App, is another source of information that the universities use to be able to understand a student and then get to know them better. The other thing that universities look at, for universities that have them, are supplemental essays. Say, for instance, here in Georgia, UGA and Georgia Tech have a supplemental essay that students have to answer. It is an essay that they've designed to be able to help to get to know you as an applicant, a student as an applicant, better. And so that plays a role in the evaluation of, when universities are looking at your application for admission. Demonstrated motivation or intellectual curiosity. That's going to come together in various places in your application. It's going to probably come through in your transcript, in the courses that you're taking in high school, in your senior year as well. They're probably going to get that information from the essays that you write, as well as the teacher letters of recommendation, and perhaps even the counselor's recommendation letter. They get to understand what you've done in school beyond the school day, meaning how do you keep yourself busy outside of the academics at school? So they are going to be looking at your activities to be able to understand, who you are, what interests you, and how do you spend your time beyond the school day. Your school counselor also provides a letter of recommendation where universities are requiring them to do so. And so they use the counselor recommendation also as another piece in the factor of evaluating you as an applicant. Your demographics, which again is some of the things that you would enter into the application, play a role, as is your ability to pay at some institutions. And so when they evaluate your application, all of these different things that you've submitted in your college application are going to be reviewed by the colleges and to be able to understand who you are as an applicant. And so the first step, obviously, at this point in the process is to understand what the college application is going to ask you to do. There are, there are institutions that have their own application for admission. For instance, Clemson has its own application for admission, but they're also on what is called the Common App. So the Common App is an application that over 1,000 universities have subscribed to, in the sense that over 1,000 universities are represented on the Common App. And so that is one of the most common applications that students use to be able to submit applications to a variety of institutions in their state and around the country. So one of the resources I'm going to share with you is called the Access Companion. And so the Access Companion was developed by independent consultants like me, who are members of the IECA. And so it was spearheaded by one of the stalwarts of the IECA, Marilyn O'Toole, and she got a bunch of us together to be able to then help, dissect the Common App and create videos as well as written instructions for students to be able to follow, to understand how to fill out the Common Application itself. Students struggle as they go through the application because there are a lot of factors that they have to address within the application. And so knowing that it is a critical portion of how colleges get to evaluate you, we felt a resource was needed. And so we've developed this Access Companion to be a tool that students can use, as well as high school counselors, to be able to get their students to use and understand how to fill out the Common Application. And one of the things that sort of drove this process forward is when the Common App released the information that over 40% of students who open a Common App account ultimately did not submit one for admission. And so if there's a resource that we can provide to be able to help make it easier, we felt it was a wonderful tool for us to be able to share. So what is the Access Companion? It's a free resource that's available for students to be able to use to help understand and navigate the Common Application. It is a resource that's endorsed by NACAC, and it's listed on the NACAC's website as well. But each section of the resource that we've developed mirrors different sections of the Common App itself. There are video guides that help students understand what is being asked. And then there are examples of completed sections for each of these things. And in addition to just navigating the Common App, we've also provided resources such as understanding how to write the personal statement, resources on helping understand how to write a supplemental essay. We've explained financial aid and how that process works. Some of the resources are in English as well as Spanish. And it's meant to be a tool to be used side by side with a Common App. It's not the application, it's just a resource that you can use. The website is right here. And here's a QR code if people want to be able to just sort of screenshot it to be able to access what the Access Companion itself covers. And I'll share this resource again a little bit, the link again later. As I said, there are over 1,000 universities that use the common application to be able to get applications from students. So this resource is meant to be a free resource. It's housed on the Oregon State University's website, and that's where the resource itself resides. So the IECA contacted John Bockenstad of Oregon State University, and they agreed to host the resource on their website itself. As I said, it covers every aspect of the common application, and I'll sort of walk you through it in just a second. So it covers, how to create a common application. It explains what the profile section contains, family. It also goes to the education section. There are a lot of pitfalls within that education section because it asks students, have you taken classes outside of your high school? Have you taken colleges at a college setting? Some of these questions usually trip students up. So there are videos to be able to explain and help students understand how you're able to use that resource itself. The other resource that's available within it is understanding, as I said, how to write the college essays, and then understand that there might be school universities that require you to enter courses and grades within the common application itself. So let me just stop for 1 second, and I'm going to move it to the resource itself. And so as I said, this is what the resource itself looks like. And one of the things that we've done is sort of give students a guide as well to be able to understand how long it takes for you to complete each section of the common application itself. So for instance, with respect to the testing section, there's a neat little toolbar that students can use as well if they're planning on logging in to be able to create an account. But we help you understand what the different terminology is, for instance, with respect to understanding a test optional school, test blind, test flexible, and where test scores are mandated, for instance. The videos walk you through each section that you need to be able to complete for this. For the activities section, again, we explain how you're going to go about filling out your Common App activities. The Common App only allows students to enter 10 activities into the application itself. And so we kind of give you guidance on, how you're going to go about entering each of these things. What are the drop-down menus that you're going to use to be able to enter the activity that you want. We also tell you how to sort of use strong language to be able to explain the activities that you are already performing in school. And so with respect to the activities section, it's not something that students should generally do directly on the application. It's better if they've actually taken time to have drafted content before they transfer. And so we kind of walk you through how that process works within that section itself. The writing section is obviously the Common App essay. And again, we walk you through what the essay requires, and then there are resources for students to be able to use on how to get you to understand each of the prompts, how you would brainstorm the essays, how you would edit your essays, for instance, because it is an important component. It's the one place in the application where a student's voice comes alive. So it's really important that you take the time, the 650 words that you're given in this personal statement, to be able to help colleges understand who you are, what makes you unique and different. Share a story that allows them to understand you a bit better. Basically brings you alive on a page. And so the other thing that we also cover is on the Common App, there's a section called the additional information section. So if there are any concerns that you've had with respect to grading, ability to get specific classes, if there are specific activities that you weren't able to discuss fully in detail in the activity section and you needed to add a couple of thoughts about them in the additional information section, you've got the ability to do so. So we also help you understand the significance of one of the another 650 word space that's available in the Common Application itself. But we walk students through that process because, again, as I said, it's an important part of the college application. There's a tab that talks about how you add colleges to your Common Application. So this is a specific tab that exists within the Common App. And so we walk you through how you would go about adding colleges to your application itself so that you can then do the work that's necessary for those supplemental questions that you need to answer. Because when you add colleges, that's where you're able to tell Georgia Tech, for instance, what major you want to pursue. And, you know, same thing with UGA or the University of Florida. You have the ability to then like personalize each of those resources. We walk you through what the specific colleges, for instance, it requires for from you. For instance, as I said, some of these colleges will require you students to write additional essays for them. They may allow you to upload a resume, for instance. Some colleges don't require any additional information from you in terms of essay writing, but they do have questions because they want to understand what do you want to pursue on their college campus. They will ask you, if you're applying, for instance, to an out-of-state public school, they will ask you residency questions. Almost all of the colleges have something that asks you about whether or not you've been involved in any disciplinary action inside or outside of school. They ask you questions about parents. Some of the questions that universities ask may get a little tedious, meaning that you might be repeating content that you may have already shared in the Common App section, but at least you know that this is something that you would have to do for these schools, and it's mandatory that you be able to fill out all of these questions. Another critical component that the Access Companion covers is what is the FERPA declaration that you have to sign. And we kind of walk you through why this section is important, why it's important for students to understand why colleges are asking you whether or not you're willing to have your recommendation letters remain confidential. And then it also then walks you through how you would invite your college counselor, your teachers, and any other recommenders that you have, you know, upload information that is needed for your application itself. As I said, one of the other critical components of what we've done is also explain how to submit college applications, but we've also then added information in here about financial aid resources that might be important for families to understand. This year, the FAFSA only opens on December 1st. The CSS profile, for instance, which is a secondary application for financial aid, opened today. And there are a limited number of colleges and universities that require the CSS profile, but we're able to help you help families understand the difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile, understand key terminology that's used in those in financial aid. The resources, as I said, are there in English as well as Spanish. And there are resources as well for community-based organizations that you know, so that they can also then use the financial aid information to be able to share with families. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so the resource that I've just shared, which is the Access Companion, walks you through every component of the college application. And then, for instance, and there are specialized resources that we've also added within that section for understanding, for instance, the supplemental essays. Tim Brunhold, who is the admissions director for the University of Southern California, has a video helping students understand how to answer supplemental essay questions. So that video is there. The writing section has a essay coach who walks students through the different prompts and helps students understand what is being asked so they can brainstorm their essays. The financial aid resources are there to be able to help families understand what they're going to have to do with the financial aid component of the college application itself. Excuse me. As I said, it's called the Access Companion. But in terms of tips for students, obviously, given that the college application season is well underway, there are universities that already have rolling admissions, meaning that they've already started accepting applications for admission. There are deadlines coming up for a number of universities on October 15th, and then there are early decision and or early action deadlines on November 1st. It's important that students be well on their way to like beginning the application, but also working on making sure that they have other components of the application completed. One of the first things that students should be asking, if they haven't already done so, is asking teachers for letters of recommendation, because teachers need time to be able to craft those letters. For most teachers around the country, this is something that they're doing voluntarily, which then means that, you know, you need to give them the time and grace to be able to, you know, put together a strong letter of recommendation for you. It's really important that students create a balanced list of colleges and have that list available and ready to share with their high school counselors, because the high school counselors will need to make sure that the materials that they need to submit to these colleges and universities that you're planning on applying to are ready to go as well in time, or just, you know, given some of the universities give them a little bit of a grace period to submit the supplemental materials, but they need time to be able to gather all of that information for you. Counselors will have to write letters of recommendation in some instances for some of the schools that you may be applying to, which then means, again, they're writing for an enormous number of students. They need the time and grace to be able to, you know, focus on those. So it's important that you get them the list of schools and also talk to them about writing you a letter of recommendation. Students need to keep track of their internal deadlines. Some schools have already stated that if you need to apply for schools by November 1st, for instance, they may have an internal deadline that you have to ask by October 1st, or it might have been a couple of weeks ago, as soon as school started, that you had to have put in that request. So you need to make sure as a student that you're opening up all of the emails that you're receiving from your high school counselor. They have knowledge about what this process entails. So it's really important that you keep track of those internal deadlines within the school. You also need to track the college application deadlines. Understand, you know, what early action, early decision, rolling admissions, restricted early action, all of these terms mean. The websites of the universities will give you the information, and so will, as soon as you open up the Common App and start adding colleges to your dashboard, you will then understand exactly what the internal deadlines for each of the universities are for submitting your college application. Students could very well create which I would recommend, is create a spreadsheet that has the list of colleges that they're applying to, the deadlines for those schools. If there are essay questions that they're asking, have that list in the same place. Understand if they're asking you to upload any additional materials. If you're applying for programs, for instance, in the arts, you have to upload a portfolio, for instance. You need to know that how many pieces are being required by the university in question. You need to know what the audition like dates and deadlines are. So you also need to perhaps keep track of scholarship deadlines, because some universities have application deadlines for regular decision, but they may have an earlier deadline by which you have to submit your application to be considered for merit scholarships. So you need to be able to visit each of those websites of the universities that you're applying to and create this spreadsheet that allows you to understand when you're going to submit your application. You need to understand if the university is test optional or not. So, that's other information that you need to be able to gather from a university's website and track for yourself. The essays obviously play a big role in at least helping give universities some context for who you are as an applicant. So it's important that you take time to brainstorm them, draft them, and edit. This is not something that you can do in a day. It's really important that students take time to think about what stories they're going to share about themselves. How does that reflect who they are, what values they have, who they are as people, and who they will be on a college campus, for instance. So it's really important that you take time to draft it and then go through multiple edits of your essays to get it to final draft stage. I know with the advent of ChatGPT, there's been students have kind of maybe gravitating towards using that as a resource. Be careful about using ChatGPT or any AI to draft your essay. On the Common App, you're required to sign a statement that says everything that you've inputted into the application is your work, which then means it's really important that you do not copy paste an essay from ChatGPT or any AI source into your application. Because if the university suspects something like that, they may very well be running it through some sort of AI detection software. And again, the policies for how universities are going to approach the use of AI, for instance, varies from university to university. But almost all of them have said you can use it if you need to brainstorm an essay, but please do not copy paste an essay into your application, because technically it's not your work. Okay. The other thing that students need to obviously be aware of is financial aid. As I said, this year the FAFSA is delayed. So for 2023, the FAFSA only opens on December 1st, and that's the federal application for financial aid. And that basically doles out federal funds that go to students when they apply to college. But the CSS profile is institutional aid. And again, not every university requires it. There are only about 150 or so, 150, 180 institutions that require students to fill out the CSS profile. And that application is run by the College Board, so that the same people who administer the ACT and the AP, they administer the CSS profile. Those applications are then sent to all of the colleges that you'd say need it on your list. And those institutions use that secondary application to determine what institutional aid they're going to give you. So the federal application for financial aid is the FAFSA, and almost all institutions in this country take the FAFSA. But the CSS profile is taken by a limited number of schools, but they're using it to determine how they dole out money that is their money, meaning it's institutional aid that they're trying to figure out how to disperse to students who apply to them. And the other thing that's really important is students need to check their emails, be it from their high school counselors, and from colleges and universities. It's really important. The other thing that students need to be aware of is there are some universities that require students to enter courses and grades directly into the Common App itself, but there are other institutions that require you to report your academic record through another application called the SRAR. And that particular application, students can go in and create your account, enter all of the data, and then link the schools that require you to submit the SRAR. for instance, Clemson requires it, Florida Atlantic requires it, the University of Pittsburgh. So there are a bunch of schools that have asked students to do to submit the SRAR as part of their application itself. So your application for schools that absolutely require it are deemed incomplete unless you've actually like linked the account and done this portion of it. So it's really important that, you know, you figure out if a school on your list requires you to complete the SRAR, and then get that done in time for the deadline itself. And so here's a list of institutions. You can screenshot it, but it's also available on the SRAR website of universities that ask students to fill out the SRAR as part of the application process itself. So once you've submitted your application, which again, I would warn students, try not to do it on the day of the deadline. Try not to do it on the day before the deadline. Inevitably, what happens is there's so many students trying to submit applications at the same time that things go a little bit haywire. And so it's really important that you try and submit it days before, if not a week to 2 weeks before, if possible, before a deadline, so that you are able to then, you know, open the email that the college sends you to say, hey, create a portal using your ID on our website, and you can use that portal to be able to check to see if the application is complete. So again, as I said, it's really important that once you submit, once a student submits the application, they need to continuously check their emails, because they will be receiving emails from colleges asking you to set up the portal itself. Your decisions will be posted in the portal when the decision date arrives. As I said, the CSS profile opened today. The FAFSA opens on December 1st. But for families, it's really important that you track the financial aid application deadlines as well, because it's imperative that students take the time to submit the financial aid applications, you know, before the school set deadline. And what if you don't do it, it might very well then impact your ability to get financial aid, because if you submit it post the deadline, the school may be, you're obviously on the bottom of that list at that point, and the school may have already doled out the funds that they had at their disposal to be able to, you know, grant financial aid to other applicants. So it's really important that you track the financial aid deadlines as well for the schools that you're applying to. So what I would recommend is, given that the applications are opened, try and get it done as soon as the applications open, so that you avoid any confusion about, you know, when the applications are due, for instance. This again is a resource that families can use, as well as high school counselors. If you scan this QR code, it takes you to basically a Google Doc that allows and links each portion of the Access Companion to the section on the Common App that you would need to fill out. High school counselors can obviously, you know, share this Google Doc with their students and then assign specific sections for students to complete each week, for instance. So it really works as a handy tool for, you know, assigning students work to do. And as I said, the resource is there for them that walks them through every part of the application, so students can feel confident that they've done a good job. And if there's anything else that they can't get, they feel confused about, they definitely have you as a high school counselor as a resource for them. So that was the gist of my presentation. I think I talked really fast, but I'm hoping I've provided enough of an information, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that people may have. One of the first questions there is, should a student strive to use all 10 activities? You would want to, again, this could be something that a student could consult with their high school counselor about. but I think you would enter activities that the student believes are significant. Meaning I probably would not enter one-off activities, something that you've taken 2 hours in a year to do, for instance. But in terms of like, students usually tend to miss things that they've done. And so one of the things that you need to first make sure students do is brainstorm all the things that you've done from the time from ninth grade until today. And a great resource for trying to double check what you have been involved in is your family, because usually mom and dad are aware of what you've engaged in, what activities you've taken part in. So make sure, first of all, the list is comprehensive, and then you're aiming to write down activities that you believe are important and significant to you. The goal is, if you didn't have 10, you don't need to worry about, you don't need to fill out all 10 by putting in random stuff. Fill out the things that are important to you. But your high school counselor is a great resource that you can double check with to figure out if this is something, if something that you're thinking about entering should go into the application itself or not. Can you please repost? Oh, sure. I can go back to that slide. Yeah, here's a list of schools that require the SRAR. They've tried to make this a little bit simpler this year in terms of the way that students can fill this out. But the Access Companion also has a section on the SRAR if students want to be able to review that when they try and fill out this particular application. But this is a list of schools that require the SRAR. And again, it's really important that students fill this out also in time for deadlines, for instance, because again, you need to go in and figure out when the university expects you to have submitted this information as part of your application. One of the things that I will warn you, there are universities that require additional information to be posted to them. For instance, Clemson does not send you a link to your portal until a day or two after you've submitted your application. So if you needed to add something, or if you needed to upload any information to that portal, it's their app, the online application for Clemson has a different timeline for turnaround and access to your portal than the Common App, for instance, does. The Common App, it takes them an extra day or two to get you the link to be able to open your portal. Must students complete the Common App in one sitting, or can students save their progress and continue a few hours or days later, for example? Absolutely. So the work is saved as you go through it. So if students begin it, when I ask my students to do it, I usually assign them a section at a time. I say, go complete the profile section. The family section, for instance, requires the students to make sure that they have parent data. Because, trying to dig through and figure out when mom and dad graduated, what the major was, where they're working, all of these things require parental input. So it's really important that, you have parental access. Students need a transcript when they complete the application, including the SRAR. But even when they complete the Common App itself, it's important that they have access to their high school transcript. So there are lots of documents that are needed. And so I would recommend students do it in stages. One of the other things that I do is tell students, if you're like, if you feel like you've had a rough day and just don't feel like working on anything, jump into the Common App. It's kind of, simple kind of information that you need to enter. With the Access Companion being your resource, you can go in and fill things out quickly. So it's another way to sort of like, in a way, de-stress if you're having a rough day. So you can definitely do it in stages. Do we have any other questions? Oh, Amy, go ahead. Juan, Amy has oh, can I unmute her?
She should be able to ask her question now, I think.
Amy, did you have a question? She's still muted. Amy, okay. Does anyone else have a question in the meantime while we wait for Amy? Why do students complete the SRR when a transcript will be submitted? So the SRAR is an internal, like, it's basically the university is required. Some of the universities do not require you to send in a transcript, for instance. So this is the tool that they're going to use to import data about students. But this somehow comports with, I think, the internal workings of the university system, which is the reason why they're being asked to do this. And as I said, for some of these schools, it is listed as being optional. For some of them, it is actually listed as being mandatory. So the students need to be able to go through and understand, whether it's mandatory or optional. But to avoid any issues, I'd probably recommend doing it whether or not the school is optional. If a student does not fall into the range for an SAT, should they apply test optional? I think this is one of those questions where I suggest obviously looking at the admitted student profile, looking to see where the ranges fall. They could also talk to their college counselor. I don't want to give blanket advice on whether or not a student should apply test optional, because there are universities that require it. So we don't necessarily have the ability to decide whether or not you're going to submit test scores if the university absolutely requires it. But in the cases where you're concerned about whether or not to submit, please speak to the high school counselor. Some universities also entertain calls on questions like this, so you're welcome to call them to find out if they'd be willing to give you an answer. But I think speaking to your high school counselor would be the best way to sort of address this. No, the SRAR is not within the Common App. It is actually a separate application site. And it's right here. So if you Google SRAR, self-reported transcript, it'll take you to the website where the application resides. The student needs to go in and create an ID and enter in all of the information. And then you've got the ability to link the schools to the application. And so that is done. Each school has its own process. So it's really important that the student figures out what this internal process is for the schools that they're applying to. But once you've completed the SRAR, it's easier for you to be able to link the college to the SRAR that you've just created. Are there any other questions? But in terms of another tip for instance, the supplemental essays and stuff, there are, those are really important part of the college admissions process, because what they're asking you for is information that allows them to understand who you would be on their college campus. For a lot of them, the question also asks you, why are you interested in pursuing a particular major? Why are you interested in coming to our college campus? So it's really important that students take the time to research those colleges and universities to be able to understand why they're choosing that specific university to apply to, why they believe there's a fit there, what can they share about their interests, academics, as well as what the prompts are asking, to be able to establish a fit between them and the university that they're applying to. So it's really important that you're not copying, pasting the same essay for every school. So again, I would ask students to definitely take a look at the Access Companion, because the Access Companion provides students with the resources that they need to help understand how to write some of these supplemental essays, and write the main Common App essay as well. Usually that's where kids get stuck, is in trying to understand how to write the Common App essay. It's really important that they already have begun that process now. But this link again takes you to all of those resources that I've just mentioned. And students just need to make sure that they're keeping track of dates, deadlines, internal as well as college deadlines, to be able to make sure that they're on track to get everything completed in time. And again, in this country, we have over 3,000 plus universities. So, not every one of them is highly selective or rejective, as a terminology could be used. But so it's important that students build a balanced college list, and then, apply to the schools where they believe they will be thriving once they leave home. So I hope this helps as a great start up or a push for students to get themselves through this application cycle. Thank you very much for joining us today for this. If anybody has questions, we'll stay on to answer any questions. But it's thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday.